hear Sunsara respond to these questions, okay?
Answer the question then.
Well, it's incredibly important. There's clear video evidence when Milo was here of multiple people who were not in any way armed with helmets, didn't have sticks, being attacked by black masked mobs using their Antifa flags as weapons, being maced after they literally said positive things about counter protesters, being beaten unconscious on the street. For you to say you have no idea just shows how completely out of touch with reality you are.
Yeah. Hey, I have video evidence. God.
That's not true.
Wait a second. I said I don't know about violence against the individuals in his group.
Yes,
Excuse me.
You know Ann Coulter's every word, but you don't know what happened?
Yeah,
bullshit.
Let her speak.
She doesn't let other people speak.
Sit down.
Yeah, sit
People
down.
came here.
Drag me out of here. How about that?
People took time. People took time out of their day to be part of this event. So respect the integrity of the event.
Your followers are costing the Berkeley community hundreds of thousands of dollars in
You know what?
We don't like it. Where are you from anyway? You're not from our community, are you?
You know what? This is an absurd. That's an absurd thing. That's like the argument that they made for the civil rights workers. You're not from here, are you? That's the shit that they said. Look,
You just
I'm
made
talking-
that argument.
You're hurting our community with your violent.
No, actually, you're making an accusation you don't know anything about.
You have been making accusations you know nothing about.
If you guys, you know what? It's like somebody came in. It's like somebody came in and dropped a bomb and leveled the school. And then
It's a
you
hypothetical.
want to walk in. Hold on. You want to walk in and say, but you know what? Somebody tripped somebody over here. It's a false equivalence.
You're hallucinating.
I am talking about massive violence.
You sit down.
The lies coming out of your mouth, lady, are just amazing.
Yeah.
Speak the truth.
So we're going to continue to ask.
Calling you a liar? Are you support Donald Trump calling anybody a liar? Are you guys fucking kidding me? The fucking college Republicans have any goddamn nerve to call anybody out? You guys support white supremacy. You guys are fascists. You guys bring homophobes and transphobes on the campuses and support mobs to beat people down. No, fuck that. People should fight you. Aren't you profiling? I thought profiling was a sign of
People
evil.
didn't hear that. She just very correctly and righteously said it is the height of hypocrisy for Republicans at this campus who brought Milo the fascist to town, who invited Ann Coulter, who wants to flog black children. You have no right to speak about this. I'm sorry. I'm not addressing you. And you know what? We're going to take another question. Here we go.
Over here in the chaser. You spoke. Please let the brother speak over here, man.
Go ahead, man.
Oh man. So all this doesn't really feel like we're rising above Trump. It kind of feels like we're singing ourselves down to this level.
Yeah.
I think you guys should have some free speech. That's a great thing. I don't know about revolution really being an answer to all of this. It incites violence.
No kidding.
And it doesn't work against its government. It's too big of a government. And I get that Berkeley's feeling oppressed and angry or whatnot. I don't know if you really represent a larger part or whatnot. But I would ask you what you think about silent protests. And you look at history, how Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, Berkeley have, right? All these people have done, they've understood that you can't fight the government. You can't fight it all the way, you know? It doesn't work anymore. But there have been small ideas that do work. Silent protests. What's my question? That was my question. How do you feel about silent protests?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to repeat, and the essence of what I understand that you're saying is, one, you don't think revolution works against this government, and it would only incite more violence. And your question was, what about other forms of protest, specifically silent protest, along the lines of MLK, Mahatma Gandhi, and Cesar Chavez. Is that more or less what you said?
Those things have worked, and they've actually.
And those things have worked and
My other
changed
thing
things.
too would be why not attack from a legal standpoint? Like they're talking about the laws and such. If you look at the amendments and everything, Republicans have got that game locked down.
Okay, so I'm going to pause you because I want to
Hold
repeat.
on, I'm not.
No, let me, before you go further and I forget what you're saying. He
I'm
also
gonna
said,
say what I'm doing.
all right, go ahead, man.
But they've got that stuff locked down, and the legislation protects and culture and all of them. Why don't we think about, and as a college, start like passing some legislation, putting something on the table so that there is more protection, or we do the right thing in this scenario. But yeah, I think we should avoid reacting in violence because that's just kind of what it's just gonna make the news.
Okay, so revolution doesn't work, it causes more violence. Silent or peaceful protest along the lines of Mahatma Gandhi, MLK, and this sort of thing. And why don't we go the legal route? The Republicans have done it, they've got the lockdown, they're passing laws, why don't we? And I'm going to try to answer these together. I actually think the last question you asked, the Republicans and fascists have got the laws on lockdown, why can't we do the same thing, actually reveals part of the answer. This is a state that is built on white supremacy and exploitation. It is not a neutral state. It is a state that defends exploitation, not only in this country but around the world. You notice you have the right to hire somebody, to fire them if you can't make a profit off of them. You have the legal right to put somebody out of work even if they're going to starve to death. You do not have the right to eat. You do not have the right to eat. What could be more basic to being a human being on this planet than the right to eat? But you can't have that right under capitalism because food, like everything else, is a commodity. It doesn't get grown, it doesn't get shipped, it doesn't get picked, it doesn't get put on the shelves unless somebody at each point along the way receives an exchange for their labor put into it in the form of money. It's a commodity, it's for profit. So if you eat or don't eat is not a fundamental right, but being able to exploit somebody else, to hire their wages, to make profit off of them is a fundamental right under capitalism. This is one example of many about why the state serves the economic base, it enforces that. And you can't pass laws in violation of that without ripping up the foundation underneath it. That's why you need a revolution. Just hold with me there. That's why you need a revolution. Now, here's where your second thing is wrong. You say that a revolution can't work against the state. I will grant you that it is very, very, very difficult. And it is what a lot of the revolutionary movements in the 60s broke their backs on. They could not figure out how you go up against this massive military power of the state. This is one of the tremendous breakthroughs that Avakian has made in developing and advancing the strategy for revolution. And people should get into it. It's not any day of the week that you can create, you can make a revolution, but there are conditions that can come together, certain kinds of crises, where there is enough arousal of the masses of people, where there's enough fighting among the rulers, where there's enough weaknesses among them, that you can actually, and if you have built up the organization, prepared the ground, prepared the people, and prepared the leadership, where you can have a go at leading millions to wage a revolution. That is possible.
So
no empire lasts forever.
Are you practicing violence?
So
you're advocating violence against any Trump supporter? Is that it?
hold up, I'm finishing.
Well.
So that is possible. I think it's worth working for. At the same time, people who are coming from different perspectives, we should work together. Silent protest, there's all kinds of tactics that can be part of the process. Sometimes that can be a good idea, sometimes other things are necessary. If you want to make it, what I disagree with is institutionalizing it as the only form and as the criteria. That I find ineffectual. And actually, Mahatma Gandhi, MLK, the examples you gave, they didn't bring about fundamental change. Everything, I mean, look, I just went and heard the 50th anniversary of MLK's speech on Beyond Vietnam, where he said, at this very hour, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world is the government of America. That is more true today than in MLK's time. The things he stood up and fought against have gotten worse. They've gotten worse. This is why I was going to mention Jeff Sessions once again. And I got cut off when I was talking about this, but Jeff Sessions, look, after the police killed Laquan McDonald, 17-year-old black youth in Chicago, shot him 16 times and covered it up all the way to the highest level of this.
Hillary Chicago, right?
Tamir Rice, shot and killed, 12 years old, and that happened in Cleveland. After Ferguson and all over the country, Oscar Grant, black people being killed by police, and people rose up against this. There was what was called consent decrees put in by the federal government. Mainly they were to restore the legitimacy of the police forces, make a few cosmetic changes to try to reestablish the legitimacy of these police that were so exposed for having murdered and tortured and brutalized so many people. They banned things like pistol whipping. They banned things like tasing somebody who were in handcuffs. They banned things that were so
communists ban children.
And Jeff Sessions
Communists ban children.
Shackle the police, and he's
What
lifting
question is she
the
answering?
police. They would
Is
shackle
this
the
ranting?
police. So I don't want to hear a story about
I'm protesting
how it's okay
like she says to protest.
to accomplish lasting change.
But this is what she said to do.
Who fought with him were very righteous. But the changes
I'm just
they
using
brought
the
about
tactics that she wants to advance.
Why was it about?
It's not effective, right? We agree.
Okay, so right here with the fraternity switch. Go ahead. No, behind you.
So this is being asked in many iterations. I'm going to give a very simple question. This is being asked in many iterations. I'm going to give a very simple question. Do you justify violence against fascists? Yes or no? And if no, why don't you loudly condemn all your followers for enacting violence against fascists?
Yeah.
Wait, what do you call World War II?
Wait, I want to know.
Look, I want to say very frankly, not all violence is the same. Not all violence is the same.
So who gets to pick and choose what's good and what's bad violence?
The violence of a rapist,
Excuse me, people should actually listen to what she has to say here. She's answering.
She's not listening to our question.
You should listen to her response.
Many people wanted to hear the question heard again.
The violence of a rapist is degrading, demeaning, horrific, shattering of not just that woman, but it's a form of terror against all women. That is violence that should always be opposed. The violence of a woman fighting back against her rapist, even brutalizing him to get herself free, that is liberating violence. Let's just be clear here.
What about violence against unarmed conservatives?
The violence of the lynch mob, of stringing black people up, of flogging black people.
We're not talking about that.
I am talking about.
That was not the question.
Yeah, and I'm talking.
You're misdirecting the question. That wasn't the question.
The violence of people standing up to stop a lynch mob. Now, I have not advocated any violence tonight. Let me be clear.
Yeah.
But I'm coming out here to support people whose heart is in the right place, who are standing up against a fascist regime.
So if you think your heart's in the right place, it's okay to be violent?
Dropping drones on civilians at wedding parties. I will condemn police who are terrorizing and brutalizing with the backing of a fascist state. Black people, Latino youth. I will condemn ICE that has dragged a woman out of a cancer brain tumor
You
patient.
guys have attacked people in our community with your violence.
That's right.
State. And if you guys can't distinguish between violence of the state, violence backed up with
The
authority,
violence of the
and
Antifa.
masses of people standing up, then I'm sorry.
What about violence against conservatives? Unarmed conservatives?
Right here in the middle. Go ahead.
I have a little bit of a different question. So you guys are refuse fascism, and I very much buy a lot of the stuff you guys are talking about. How I do think that the Trump regime is one of the most authoritarian regimes that we've seen in this country in over a century. I, however, do not really partake in the ideals of communism that you also espouse. And you did say that you are open to working with a lot of people who it's not a communist organization, right? But a lot of the responses that you actually
The United States Communist Party right here.
but a lot of the responses you've been giving, so
Communist Party United States. Shut up!
So a lot of the responses that you've been giving to a lot of the questions, you've used a lot of anti-capitalist rhetoric to give responses. As someone who is very willing to refuse fascism, I'm not going to fight it. I do not want to use any sort of violence. What techniques or tips or recommendations you have in ways that I can help refuse fascism without taking up arms or without without preventing other people from using free speech, but I still want to fight this. Use this fascism.
So he asked, he said, that a lot of what I've said about the Trump regime, he would agree with. It's the most authoritarian regime. It's very horrifying. I'm paraphrasing. But he's not a communist. And a lot of the answers I've given have been anti-capitalist and they've been getting at the communist revolution. He doesn't agree with that. But I did say that Refuse Fascism is a broader organization and unites people coming from different perspectives. And so what would be my advice to him, as somebody who also wants to refuse fascism and stand up against this? What tactics, what methods, besides those of the communist revolution?
Yes.
Is that right?
Essentially, yes.
Okay. So it's a great question, too, and I would say this. I think you characterized it accurately. I've been speaking a lot about the communist revolution because I've been getting questions about it, and I'm more than happy to talk about it. I think it's very important. But it is very important that there's no future. There's no revolution. There is no future short of revolution that is decent for humanity, that doesn't deal with and go through the fight that is posed right now to dislodge this regime, to drive it from power. And so we do come together. And this is something I'm putting myself to together with others. And everybody should be part of it, whether you want silent protest, whether you want this kind of protest, that kind of protest. If you don't want to live in a fascist America, we need to stand shoulder to shoulder together against this. So as for tactics, I would say this. RefuseFascism.org. I encourage people to go to the website. It's got a mission statement, a call to action. I hope we have copies of it here. In it describes 4 things. One is that everywhere, wherever people are standing up and protesting, we need to take up the single unifying demand to drive the regime from power. And that is something that needs to be put on the map, on the agenda. People need to make that their conscious mission. Not just resisting. You don't resist fascism for 4 years and wait it out. They're remaking the laws, they're remaking the country, they're moving very rapidly. So we have to drive them out. That's number 1.
At the ballot box?
Fix yourself on that. Number 2. We spread the power of no. And we spread the no all over society. We're saying no pussy grabbing, no Muslim ban, no border wall, no deportation, no nuclear bombs, no shutdown, no fascist USA. This is something that needs to be a symbol. You've seen it probably in the protest footage around the country. It needs to be everywhere. By spreading this no, by wearing it, by spreading it, by having it in shop windows, it's part of shaping and giving definition to a clear call rejection of the whole regime and making this seen and visible. It's part of getting organized. It's part of seeing that we're not alone. It's part of emboldening the side that needs to stand up. So spreading the no is very important. You could do that in an afternoon. Go to your local shops. You can put it in your window. You can wear it you can put it on your car. You can spread the no all over the place, and you should. Number 3. Every crime this regime commits, every act it carries out, and all of its fascist hitmen and operatives, they need to be protested. They need to be confronted and stood up against. We cannot let it be normalized where, it's just Trump passing another executive order banning Muslims. It's just Trump encroaching again on women's access to reproductive rights. It's just Trump threatening the media again. Every time people need to stand up and resist, and protest takes many forms. And it should take many forms. Number 4, all of us need to be organizing and working together to organize and mobilize and get ready for the time, which we need to be fighting to make very soon, when millions can be won to go into the streets and stay in the streets. Night after night, day after day, refusing to leave and demanding that the regime be driven from power. This is what people did in South Korea not long ago. They went in the streets, and it was not a protest as usual. It was not a protest as usual. And I want to say this to people in Berkeley. I love your question. It's very important. But to people in Berkeley, to people everywhere, but to people here, not a protest as usual, where we go out and we feel comforted by being among others who think like us. I get that. It's good to be among others who think and feel like you. But we have to go out to stop them. That's also not going out and just pleading and hoping that somebody in power notices. We want them to know how we feel. We're protesting so they'll listen. We need to protest in a way that recognizes that they are not listening, they don't care. We have to stop waiting for them to listen. We have to act in a way that refuses to move until they move. We have to protest in such numbers in the millions, and we have to be organizing for that now so that we create the kind of massive political crisis where every faction among the rulers has to respond, and they have to drive this regime from power. It is going to be a huge fight, and we need here for people to aim for that, and not to seek comfort.
If I did that here, if I did that right now, is that irritating?
Okay, and in the spirit of getting organized to drive this regime from power, I want to encourage people to sign up with Refuse Fascism. You were given contact sheets on your way in. Fill them out. Leave them with the people as you leave. Okay, but stick around because as people can see, there's the.
I want to hear disavow attacks on unarmed conservatives.
Okay, and we're taking people who raise their hands right here in the front. Go ahead.
People can't hear you.
Yes, speak up.
They still can't.
Let them speak, we'll repeat it. Just let them speak.
On the topic of Milo, you seem to be doing a lot of whataboutism. I think it's very clear that you are saying completely unrelated stuff like drone strikes in order to avoid condemning the violence and arson that night. That is the second thing. I feel that you are basically approve of violence, and you approve of violence against people whom you label as fascists. A label that you use very liberally.
Yeah.
A common thing that people say is you guys basically call everyone you disagree with as fascist. And second, next question. Philosophically, what do you think gives you the right of custodianship over the minds of students and residents in Berkeley? What gives you the right to rob a student of the right to listen to whomever they choose? And before you say that Milo already has a mainstream platform, that has nothing to do with if I as a student would like to hear him for the first time. And on a practical ground, do you not see that Milo's reputation has been helped tremendously by the violent actions of the mobs that night? He is a troll. I don't even like Milo, but he's a troll, and he's got the best reaction you could have ever hoped for that night. That night was the night of his life because he got a bunch of people burning stuff in Berkeley, and he got to speak to millions of Americans on Fox News instead of a couple hundred students in Berkeley. You probably not see that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to take your questions starting with the last one, which is you were saying Milo got what he wanted by being dramatically protested. And I think this is, if you zero in and all you care about is Milo, you might have a point. But if you pull back the lens and you recognize the fact that there is a fascist America being imposed, and Milo is a minion. Milo is a troll, but he's a minion. Okay? He is a tool
How do you
of this
know?
regime. He is a tool of this regime. And if you sit back, maybe Milo might be a little less limelight, but this fascist regime continues to march. Let's just be honest. They're not going away if you ignore them.
So you're okay?
It doesn't really matter if Milo gets a little bump and another one gets a depression among their operatives. The question is, are we going to stop a fascist America? And there's no way that's going to happen without
What
people
question did you
standing up
answer?
and driving them off the campuses and driving them out of power. And no, it's not depriving students of their right to hear him. He
Why-
does have a platform, and I'm sorry if you don't want to hear that, but that's the facts. He does have a platform, and the people, look, he worked for Breitbart. Breitbart's main force is now the advisor to the president. When Milo got shut down, the president used his Twitter feed to threaten the university. This is not a minor thing. This is not some marginal figure with no power, and power does matter. When Raphael and 15 others went to Cleveland last summer during the Republican convention and exercised constitutionally protected speech and burned the American flag, and said America was never great, they were brutally assaulted and arrested. They were held preemptively in jail to keep them from being on the streets and protesting during that. And then shortly thereafter, Donald Trump used his Twitter feed not to say, oh my God, the Cleveland police are suppressing speech. We might defund them. He said, I think people who burn the flag should lose their citizenship. Okay, so let's not pretend like these rights are floating in the air. They're not.
Why don't you address the attacks on unarmed Trump supporters?
I keep coming back to the fact that there is a state There is power behind it, and there are fascists in that.
You work for the FBI.
Finally, no, he asked another question.
Sit down.
You work for the FBI.
Okay, so he asked one other question, which I want to speak to, because this gets thrown around. He asked one other question, which was, he suggested, and I've heard this suggestion before, that people like me just call anybody I disagree with a fascist.
That's what you do.
That's what you've been doing. You've been doing it all night.
Fascism is a scientific term. Hold on. Fascism
A
is
scientific term?
You know, for people that claim to care about free speech, you have been consistently disrupting that over and over again. And you need to explain why you never speak.
I'm using the tactics.
Let her speak. We're about to answer. She was about to answer the last question that he raised. Can you please let her answer that?
Look at the difference, though. People interrupting you versus violence. All I had to do was walk forward to get that reaction.
Yeah.
Imagine if I brought a lot of sticks and just busted your head. And who here was that?
You're fucking military organization, aren't you? You work for the FBI, don't you? Yeah, you do.
Okay, so this man just said all he had to do was voluntarily run out when people stood up. What, he should have the right to come out and physically intimidate or assault somebody?
What about attacks on innocent Trump supporters?
Excuse me.
You're okay with that?
That's not the fact. Now you can sit down.
You work for the
Everybody can
FBI,
sit down.
It's okay, guys.
And these accusations being blurted out, it's just lunatic.
Hey, don't
back
something,
there.
dude.
Come on, this woman, I don't know what she's screaming
Hit
about.
somebody then.
But I'm going to answer his question. I'm going to answer his question, which is, what is, when I say the word fascism, am I just name calling? No, I am not. Fascism is a form of capitalist dictatorship. It's a form of rule that discards democratic rights and protections which have traditionally been afforded. It completely obliterates the freedom of the press. It suppresses the ability of people to speak out and dissent and protest. It criminalizes opposition. Fascism has real meaning. And no, this country has committed many crimes. I was just talking about, I was part of this when we burned the flag. We've committed many crimes. I believe America has never been great. Now, I'm not speaking for everybody in routine fascism when I say that, but I believe America was never great. From slavery through genocide, through the Iraq War, through the genocidal war in Vietnam, through the death squads in Guatemala and Honduras, America was never great. But I have not said that America was fascist until the Trump regime is in power. This regime is fascist because they are taking a sledgehammer to traditional democratic rights.
So which communist country has been great then?
Russia.
What happened to Russia in 1919?
Okay, so let's get a show of hands. The guy in the far back with the pen has had your hand up for a while. Go ahead, man.
I hate to ask a not emotionally charged question and get back on topic, but censorship of all types has a very poor track record.
Okay, hang on one sec. You know, we're going to have to ask you to leave, okay? We're going to have to ask you to leave because you're disrupting this event. People that want to hear this event,
People want to hear
people
Milo
that made time
and
to
Ann
be
Coulter.
here, please sit down or you're going to have to leave, okay? And go ahead.
Censorship of all types has a track record of amplifying messages that it originally seeks to suppress. It's like fighting a fire with gasoline. I never would have heard of J.D. Salinger, NWA, or Milo Yiannopoulos if they weren't censored in some way. So putting aside all arguments of whether it's right or righteous, what makes us think that it's going to work this time, and what does it matter if it's right or righteous if it's not going to work?
Yeah.
So, that censorship has a bad track record in every circumstance, and that even if it's right and righteous, it always has the effect of amplifying the voice that was attempted to be suppressed. And you gave the example of J.D. Salinger, Public Enemy, and NWA, you're right, NWA, and Milo Yiannopoulos, and said you never would have known what any of those were except for the fact that they were censored. Am I characterizing you correctly?
Yes.
So even if it's righteous to stand up against somebody like Milo, is it effective? Now, I would say that it is not the case that censorship always has the impact of amplifying that which was censored. In the cases of NWA, what song are you talking about? Fuck the police?
Fuck the police.
Fuck the police. Fuck the police, and I remember better another example of Cop Killer, which was another song around the same time.
That was Ice-T when he went solo.
No, I know. I'm bringing it up because I remember the battle around it much better. The fact was, it was a huge fight. It was a huge fight to make that something that threw back in their faces. People had to put a lot of money and a lot of resources, a lot of energy. And there's a lot of music. There's a lot of art. There's a lot of radical thinkers that never have seen the light of day because of that kind of censorship. It does not always boomerang first, number one. And especially, once again, if you are going up against entrenched power, it is very often the case that that does not happen. Now, certain times with Fuck the Police, that hit such a nerve. It spoke so deeply to the lived experiences and the fury that was pent up in so many that there was a lot of people with an appetite for it. And so there was a basis for that to be fought out. But it was not a guarantee. It is not first A, then B. First you get censored, then you get big. That is actually not what usually happens. Second, with these people, and I'll repeat, with the people like Milo, with the people who have the backing of the state and connections to the state, they actually are imposing their will whether you stand up against them or not. It is a myth. They've said this about every group. Nazis, ignore them. They'll go away. It does not work that way. They were in power. People had to stand up and confront them. And here Donald Trump and his intellectual hitmen like David Horowitz, his the trolls like Milo, these people and people who think like them are shaping policy and imposing. I'll say David Horowitz, one of the people who was coming to this campus, one of his proteges, Stephen Miller, is the one who helped craft the Muslim ban. He's in the White House. He's one of the senior advisors. He came out after the court stopped the Muslim ban. He came out and said, soon our enemies will see that Donald Trump's power is substantial and will not be questioned. And he said that they're going to, the courts are not supreme. Never mind the fact that their name is literally the Supreme Court. Okay?
Trump wasn't the only one that banned Muslims.
These people are shaping policy. So the idea that if you sit down and you don't give them the attention they want, that they'll go away or they won't get big, they are huge. And they are zeroing in on humanity. And the only thing that we have to rely on, the only thing that we can do as a recourse is to mobilize masses of people who do not want to live in that fascist America to stand up against it. To stand up against it, to shut it down, to drive it out. And through doing set an example where other people take the same lead. And then you could get a dynamic where there's a lesson of fuck the police, where people stand up and say, I want this, I'm blasting it out the windows, and other people hear about it and do the same. We need not just to drive a Milo off campus, but we need to set off a culture. Right now, we need to do what the German people should have done when Hitler came to power. We need to lead people to stand up against these fascists wherever they are on the march, wherever they are starting their poison, whenever they come and try to toxify and poison the minds of young people on the campuses and intimidate the people who stand up and protest. We need people standing up and saying it's right to stand up, and we need more people having their backs when they do that. And that needs to set off across the country and all over the world as we do that. All over the world, people will take hope. People will take hope, and people will celebrate. And if we sit back, their lives are being destroyed, and the future is being destroyed. And there's no avoiding it. We either fight it or we lay down for it. Those are the choices.
All right, right here with the glasses in the back. Go ahead. Yeah, you.
Okay.
Stand up.
I wanted to, highlight a point of common ground that was actually achieved earlier. There was a gentleman here who talked about how the woman that laughed at Jeff Sessions session, and she was arrested, and then he said that that was unconstitutional, but he was posing a question to you that seemed in opposition to your view. So one, I want to highlight that that was a point of common ground that was achieved. Second, I want to ask you the question, I want to ask you to compare and contrast the situation of the woman who laughed, which is an involuntary free expression, versus an edited speech that was going to be given on campus by Ann Coulter or Milo Kunis. I'm kind of already doing the work that I'm asking you to do in my question, but could you just compare the power dynamics of those two instances so that we can understand how they're different cases?
Okay. The first part of the question was trying to establish that you thought there was some common ground between me and this young man who asked a question earlier about doesn't the Constitution guarantee everybody the right to speak? And I hate to say it, but I don't think that was a point of common ground. I think that was a point of illusion and fact. Meaning this, he was saying, look, you don't need to stand up and defend the rights of people to speak. It's already enshrined, it's already protected. And I was giving the example of this woman who was arrested for laughing as a factual evidence that is just not the case.
She wasn't arrested for laughing. She was
But it
arrested
just
when she
wasn't the
protested
case.
being dragged out of here.
But it just wasn't the case. And you know what?
It's factual. She wasn't arrested for laughing. She was arrested because as they were dragging her out, she protested very loudly, and that's why she was arrested.
How dare you not like being physically assailed by law enforcement for giggling in a hearing? Okay, so this was actually a difference. This was me saying, and it's important. This was me saying, look, the right to speak is an important right that should be protected, especially those who are challenging it in the state. And the fact is that it's not going to apply.
I'm going.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
My name's Sana. I'm a student here, but I'm reporting at the New York Times.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to.
I'm live streaming this on
that's
Periscope. Okay.
Actually, I'll hold on. I have some questions, but they're just for you. So.
Why can't you ask me live?
Just because I don't think it's particularly professional.